morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello. Thank you all for joining us here today at Counts Brothers Music. Just a quick heads up before we welcome our guests today. Next month, we're excited to have Travis Womack join us for the Legend Series. That'll be on Wednesday, November 19th at 10:30 a.m. So mark your calendars. At this time, if you'll please silence your cell phone, anything that makes noise, beepers, anything, that would be greatly appreciated. Unless you are a doctor, then you're excused. Okay, leading today's discussion is Fletch Brown, Operations Manager and Program Director for WXFL-FM and one of the most decorated voices in Southern radio. Fletch has been named Media Market Personality of the Year multiple times by the Alabama Broadcasters Association, hosted Muscle Shoals to Music Row Live for 15 years, and continues to be a passionate supporter of artists across the region. So let's give it up for Fletch Brown. And our guest today, Mr. Terry Woodford, received a BS degree in textile science from Auburn University in 1966, earned a Master of Science degree from the Institute of Textile Technology in 1968, and later he took Mind and Body Medical Institute courses at Harvard Medical School. While still in school, Terry was an exclusive songwriter and recording artist for Rick Hall's music publishing and production company. From 1963 to 1968, Rick produced 5 singles on him that were released on Fame record labels and United Artists Records. He also sang on national radio commercials and opened for or performed with Jackie Wilson, Neil Diamond, Johnny Rivers, Percy Sledge, B.J. Thomas, and Sam the Sham. In 1969, he was asked to leave his job in South Carolina and partner with Swampers, Jimmy Johnson, Roger Hawkins, Barry Beckett, and his former Mystics band member David Hood to help him establish and develop Muscle Shoals Sound Recording Studio's publishing and production companies. In 1972, he left Muscle Shoals Sound and started a production and publishing company with famed studio keyboard player Clayton Ivey. In 1974, Terry and Clayton were signed as the first white exclusive record producers for black-owned Motown Records. They ran a Motown A&R office on Avalon Avenue, where Dynamic Dentistry is now. They produced, wrote, and or published songs for the Temptations, the Commodores, the Supremes, and Thelma Houston's Grammy finalist song, You've Been Doing Wrong for So Long. Their instrumental Scratchin' on the Magic Disco Machine album was the 6th most sampled disco track in the hip-hop era. It was featured in numerous electronic, pop, hip-hop hits and the Netflix TV series The Get Down. In 1975, 17 Magazine, The Village Voice, Record World Magazine, and others published articles about Terry establishing the first 4-year degree program of its kind at the University of North Alabama. Jerry Moss, president and co-founder of A&M Records, commended him for being the first to offer young people a comprehensive academic opportunity to learn about a field that traditionally had to be learned the hard way. He created and taught 4 different commercial music business classes for 8 years. Many of his graduates went on to be very successful songwriters, producers, arrangers, engineers, music store owners, recording studio owners, and business leaders in the music industry. This year, UNA celebrates the program's 50th anniversary. Terry served as the first chairman of the Alabama Music Hall of Fame board that raised the awareness and money that helped build the museum in Tuscumbia. He also served 2 terms on the national chapter of the Board of Governors of the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, 5 years as an American Song Festival National Finalist Judge, and co-founder and vice president of the Muscle Shoals Music Association. In 1976, Terry and Clayton left Motown and built Wishbone Recording Studio across from the airport in Muscle Shoals. Their first year in the studio, they published and engineered hits It's a Crazy World by Mac McAnally, Baby I Want You by FCC, and The Angel in Your Arms by a girl trio called Hot. Hot's million-selling hit was Billboard Magazine's Song of the Year and held the record for being on Billboard's Hot 100 Singles chart longer than any other song for 13 years. 8 years later, it was a top 5 country hit by Barbara Mandrell. This song, co-written along with Tommy Brassfield, became a BMI Million Performance song. That same year, Lenny LeBlanc and Pete Carr recorded their big hit, Falling, in the studio. Hank Williams Jr.'s classic album, Family Tradition was the studio's first big hit country album. Two of Wishbone's exclusive songwriters, Mac McAnally and Donnie Lowry, co-wrote the song Old Flame for the group Alabama that sold several million copies. Terry and Clayton also produced records and or published songs for Jimmy Buffett, Roy Orbison, John Kay of Steppenwolf, Anne Murray, Wayne Newton, Brenda Lee, John Prine, and many others. In 1985, Helen Keller Hospital newborn nurses tested Terry's experimental recording of traditional nursery songs with an in-tempo human heartbeat rhythm. Nurses found that 94% of crying babies stopped crying in less than 2 minutes when the music was played. But when he saw his heartbeat lullabies miraculously comfort upset babies struggling for survival after open heart surgery, his life changed. In 1987, he left the music entertainment business to spread the use of the therapeutic music. Hundreds of thousands of copies of his music and method to quickly stop crying and get babies to sleep all night have been purchased by the military, hospitals, health departments, corporations, and child abuse prevention organizations. In 2005, the same recordings were discovered by members of the American Boarding Kennels Association to quickly comfort anxious barking dogs. In a study conducted by UAB Huntsville doctoral candidate Willie King, the therapeutic recordings were also found to comfort and reduce demented behavior and increase cognitive abilities for people with dementias. For the past 40 years, Terry has been interviewed about the success of the heartbeat lullabies on hundreds of talk, radio, TV shows, newspapers, and trade magazines, including the 700 Club, CBS National News, QVC, BBC, Worldwide Radio, AARP, Baby Talk, and Physician's Assistant magazines. He has been a frequent guest speaker at medical facilities, nursing homes, and military installations in the U.S., England, and Canada. The Heartbeat Lullaby still receives millions of streams annually. So, without a further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Terry Woodford and our moderator, Mr. Flex Brown.
Wow. What a bio, right?
You got to have a lot of air to do that.
That's a heck of a bio. That's our show. Thank you for coming. Good night, everybody. No, actually, as impressive as that is, those are data points. Those are credits. Those are bullet points that you would use to sum up the achievements of a person. And in a town as legendary as Muscle Shoals, you expect that a town this legendary produces, well, legends. And sitting to my left is one of those legends. He has had his fingerprints on the soundtrack of American Soul from Motown to Muscle Shoals, from LA to New York. He's been all over the world with his music. He's touched souls all over the world with his work. The most important thing beyond the data points, beyond the credits, is the story. And in my heart, I'm a storyteller. And as a storyteller, I love stories. And some of the best storytellers that I listen to, that I've been blessed to meet, are musicians, songwriters, performers in the music industry, especially in a town like Muscle Shoals. I look out at the crowd and I see faces like Mike Guerrero, I see Billy Lawson, I see David Hood, I see Kelvin Holly, I see the O'Connell's, Rory and the wife are over here, all the way from Australia. They fell in love with the Shoals area. That's how legendary this town is. It pulls people from all over the world to come here and hear these stories. So today, we're going to hear the story of how a local kid with an ear for soul and a knack for song built a life that's still echoing throughout our lives today. So please welcome Mr. Terry Woodford.
Well, thank you. Yesterday was my first time to meet Fletch, and so I went over there, and he was on air at the time, and I'd just like to let you know that we did narrow this down to 3 hours. So
he could go 3.
No, let me tell you, when I was teaching at UNA, some of my students will tell you, they would count the number of cigarettes that I would smoke. It was a contest. And I would teach songwriting for 39 hours, and record production 39 hours a semester. So my problem is what I not want to talk about. But I thought, I listened to Kelvin's talk, and I really enjoyed how he was talking about when he was a young guy and stuff. And so I thought I'd let you know that I'm a World War II baby. I was born in 1942. And I lived with my grandparents in southern Indiana until I was 5 years old. And my dad came back from World War II. And you know that LST they bring up and down the river here about every 2 years? My dad was head of the engine room in an LST, so for me and my sister Angela here, it was a thrill to know all the sea stories that we heard from my dad, that he was, there's that LST. It wasn't anything like I thought of it in my mind. But we lived in a little bit south of Indianapolis in a little place called Canby, and it was just a little place on the side of the road, and we lived above a grocery store in this apartment, and I went to a county school called West Newton. The first day, my mother put me on the yellow school bus, and I didn't realize that you had to know the number of your school bus. So when it was time to go home, there was about 30 yellow school buses out there, and I didn't know what to do, so the principal brought me home. Well, so that first year, the first grade class was going to put on a play, and my role was the Sandman, and my costume was a grocery bag, brown paper sack. And my mother cut the hole out in the top and the little arm things, and they put glitter on the bag, and that was my costume. And my classmates all had colored crepe paper and stuff, and they were flowers, and they formed a semicircle behind me. And I'm singing the Sandman, and I sprinkled the little silver glitters on the flowers, and they would bow their head as soon as I put the silver glitter on them, right? And I mean, you know, this is for the parents and the grandparents, right? And my grandparents came 120 miles to see this play. And I mean, there was thunderous applause. It was just unbelievable. And I thought it was all for me. I didn't think, you know, well, I guess these other kids did. What'd they do, bow their head? So my grandfather sees it, and he says, oh, a star is born. Now, my grandfather was a coal miner, and he ran one of those 20-story high electric shovels in the strip mines, but he was also a self-taught musician. He played steel guitar, Spanish guitar, and so I was going to be his singer. And what we would sing on was a wire recorder. This is pre-tape recorders, and I'm going to pass it around because this is a wire from the wire recorder. And then, after we'd recorded on the wire recorder, he would transfer it to a record. He had a record-making machine, and what you're going to hear here in a second is what was on here, and he sent it to us because every time I go to my grandfather's house, about 3 times a year, I'd have to take out 2 days and sing with him. So he sent us this because he knew we were coming to visit. I hope I've got it at the right spot, but we'll see.
Well, I'm going to put some recording on here that you folks put on a wire when you were out here about 1948 or 9. It'll sort of remind you of your trip that time. I fished it out of my old wire recorder here, and for lack of something better to put on, why, I thought I'd put that on for you.
Wow, right? Now, was that your first live performance?
I don't know if it was the first one, but it was one of the first because it was 1948, and I was 6 at the time, and I'm singing harmony with myself. I don't know about you, but do you remember the first time you ever heard yourself, your voice being recorded? Didn't you think it sounded great? No, you hated it, and I hated the way I sounded. I sounded like a little girl, right? So I didn't do another public performance until I was a freshman in high school at my church choir, because I hated the way I sounded, and I did it with my grandfather until I was 19 years old, and his hearing got so bad he couldn't hear feedback. And I was embarrassed to tell him that he couldn't hear the feedback. So I guess the first professional recording I had, I'll kind of skip over a bunch of stuff. We started a group when we were freshmen in college at UNA, and it was David Hood and Larry Hamby and Billy Bradford and myself. And they were a year behind me in high school, but I'd gone to Ohio for a year before I started UNA, and we decided to start a band. And we called it the Mystics. Now, we came in, Fame Recording Studio hadn't been open very long, but we'd heard about it. So we had this song that we'd been messing around with. Billy and I was at Auburn and transferred there, and Larry and David stayed here. So we went in there and we spent $250. We got studio time and 500 of these. $250, right? About 2 months ago, I sold one of these for $250.
He broke even.
So we went to all the radio stations. Back then, you could go in and see the music director, he played on the air, see if there was a good response. And so we had a regional hit, so we could charge quite a bit of money playing fraternities and high schools and that kind of thing. And then in 1969, my dad told me, don't you quit college, don't you quit graduate school. He didn't have a hard time convincing me not to quit graduate school, because if I had, I'd been drafted in Vietnam, right? So anyway, I get a call from Jimmy Johnson. He said, well, we bought Fred Beavis' studio, and we'd like for you to run the publishing company. Now, I'm thrilled, except I don't know anything about publishing at all. And I said, well, how much money can you pay? And he said, well, we ain't got any money. Now, I've got my daughter over here, right? This little baby at the time. I got to have something to live on. He said, well, Jerry Wexler's going to come in and start using our studio. And I said, why don't you tell Jerry Wexler if he would put up half the money, he could have half the copyrights, and he could pay half my salary, half the writer advances, and half the demo cost. And he agreed. And I was getting paid $200 a week to run the publishing company that I knew nothing about. So I thought to myself, well, how am I going to judge people's songs? Is it just my opinion? So what? What's that, right? So being an engineer and thinking that way, I studied all the hits for 6 months, R&B, country songs. What did they have in common? What's the craft that you create a song within? Because almost all arts have a craft associated with it, right? I found all kinds of things, about 50 different things. The most important was the title. It had to be the summary of the object or the point of the whole song, right? And I saw songwriters give as much as half writer's credit just for a title. And it couldn't be copyrighted either. There were a lot of other things, the length, the time, the tempo, the structure. There was 5 basic structures of hit songs and on and on. So I figured, okay, if we incorporate that, we got a better chance of getting it recorded. Doesn't mean we're going to hit. But I had no songwriters. And Eddie Hinton and Marlon Green's office was right across from mine down in the basement at Muscle Shoals, and they didn't want me there at all, because we had an opportunity. These big artists are coming in to record, so we're right there to play songs. So a guy named Al Cederholm calls me from the Times Daily. He was the sports writer. He said, I'd like to write songs for you. He said, and I said, well, come on over. You don't have any songwriters. I'll listen to anybody. He writes sports. He might be able to write songs. And so I explained to him all of these things I had learned, right? About,
Gotta love the logic there. He writes sports. Surely he can write a song.
That shows you how desperate you are. And so I told him all these things, and if you incorporate this in your song, we've got a better chance of getting it hit. Well, about 3 weeks later, he called me and said, I got it. I stressed on him how important the title was, memorable, stick out melodically. Because these guys are not going to tell you who the artists were back then. They didn't tell you who the singer was. They didn't want you to go by the radio. They want you to listen on the radio. So he comes over and he said, it's called Love is the Tie That Binds. And I thought, well, that's an old saying. I was going to write that, but let's see. So he plays the song. I mean, everything I told him, he incorporated in that song. It was about the worst song I think I ever heard. It was about these guys coming back from Vietnam in wooden boxes. And I'm thinking, oh, you can't do that. The Vietnam War is pretty controversial as it is. That people don't want to hear that. And he said, you said that if I did this, we'd have a better chance of getting it cut. I'd like to play it for Jerry Wexler. And I'm thinking, oh no, you know. I think back many times, why did I let him play it for Jerry Wexler? And I thought maybe if Jerry Wexler would tell him it sucked, he'd believe me when I told him it sucked. You know, it's the only thing I could figure out. So we get up there, and Jerry Wexler's so diplomatic, and we're in that front office at Muscle Shoals Sound, and Al's playing his song. We get about halfway through. He said, I'm sorry. He said, I don't think that's from our artist. He was very diplomatic, and Al Cedarholm was crushed. I used to say he never wrote another song. I found out he's still alive and he lives in North Carolina. So I think he did write one more song, but it did crush him, you know. And so about 4 or 5 days later, Roger Hawkins gets a call from Jerry Wexler. He says, I think you made a mistake. The mistake was me. He thought I didn't know, right? I mean, I'm crushed. I'm in trouble. I've been working 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't get in the studio in the daytime because they're doing sessions every day. I mean, they were just like a machine, you know. So I went to a local artist and I got this red and black, got this guy to paint me draw this terrible looking creature with his finger up its nose, and the caption was "Pick a Winner." And that was going to go on my tape boxes to get people's attention. Now, engineers are not necessarily good marketing people, but I'm thinking, you know. So I sent him out all over the country, and I'd send him. Jerry Wexler also had a home down in Miami, and he'd stay down there a lot. So I'd send him down there. I knew he wasn't listening to the songs. He knew I didn't know anything. Then one day, I signed a songwriter named George Soule, and later Philip Mitchell. And George Soule was from Meridian, Mississippi. And he was an R&B guy, really could sing, and I was a top 40 kind of writer, and we just hit it off. We'd write till 2, 3 in the morning and get our songs cut, and we got cuts on Archie Bell and the Drells and Mavis Staples and on and on and on. A lot of artists. But Roger gets a call from Jerry Wexler again. He said, I got a tape box from Terry. It had 6 songs on it. He said, I'm cutting 4 of them. All of a sudden, it was like, I'm saved, you know. And he cut on Lulu, who had just had To Serve With Love. He cut a song called After the Feeling Is Gone. And I'm telling you, we were elated. You know, it was just, whether it was a hit or not, we had his blessing again. So that was my experience. Later, George decided to go over to Fame, and I decided to leave Muscle Shoals Sound and meet with Clayton Ivey, who was a Fame Gang Studio a piano player, and we started a record production company and publishing company.
That was 72, right?
Yes, sure was. And so what we did that was different than what Muscle Shoals Sound did and what Recall did is that we would do what's called speculate on singers. We go find a singer, right? We'd spend the money, record 4 sides maybe, to completion, and then I go to California or New York and try to get the record labels to sublease it, to put it out on their label, give us front money and royalties. So all the artists were signed to our production company, and we would speculate on it. And that first year, we grossed $100,000 speculating on artists and got no hits. But we made money because $100,000 back in the early 70s is equivalent to $775,000 today. So we found this guy down in Picayune, Mississippi, or Clayton found him actually. His name was Reuben Howell. And Reuben Howell was a soulful singer, you know. And so we cut some sides on Reuben. And somebody said, well, why don't you pitch him to Motown? And I said, are you kidding me? He's a white guy. He's not a black guy. And I've Motown had been in Detroit up to that point, and I'm not going to Detroit to pitch an artist for one label in the city. I could go to California and hit 15 record labels in 4 or 5 days, right? But they were in California, and I said, oh, well, why not? So I go to Motown, get an appointment. I had no trouble getting the appointment. I thought that was cool. And they loved Reuben Howe, and they signed Reuben Howe. And shortly after that, they came to us and said, we'd like for you to be exclusive record producers and songwriters. And I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. They didn't have any white guys other than us, right, doing that. Not only that, I mean, I grew up with the Temptations and the Commodores, not the Commodores, but the Temptations and the Supremes and some of these actors, to think that we were going to get to produce them and write songs for them. But more exciting even than that was they gave us so much money we didn't know what to do with it. It's like, we're not business guys, all right? Clayton's from North Florida and a golfer too. I'm an engineer. We don't know anything about business. So we decided we're going to go get a company car because we knew that was a write-off. So I said, what would you like, Clayton? He said, well, how about a Corvette? And I said, well, yeah, we'll look successful whether we are or not. So I go over to Gene Crump Chevrolet, and I got long hair at the time, and nobody waited on me. I was there 20, 30 minutes, and I didn't even see the Corvettes. That's what I want. Finally, this guy comes over to me. He said, Terry, is that you? And my dad used to buy cars from Miley Buick, right? He said, what can I do for you? I said, well, I'd like to have 2 Corvettes, no trade-in, cash. I said, what do you got? He said, they got a silver one and they got an orange one. He said, the silver one's on its way. I said, well, let me call Clayton. I asked, what do you want, Clayton? He said, I'll take the silver one. These were hardtop convertibles. Now, what do you think of 1974 Chevrolet Corvette hardtop convertible cost back then? Just to give you some feeling for what inflation has done. Anybody know? Guess? $7,450. I gave him $7,150 each and thought I made a deal. So there's a picture that come up here with where our Motown office was, and it was in the old Dynamic Dentistry office that's here on Avalon. And our 2 Corvettes are sitting out there. So what was different? You had some questions. What was different about producing at Motown and producing in Muscle Shoals? And of course, we had an A&R office here. We could sign 3 artists a year. So the difference was if you're going to produce the Temptations, you get to produce 4 sides. This producer's producing 4 sides. So there's maybe 16, 20 sides are being produced on the Temptations, and then they pick what they want on the album. So if you made the album, it's going to go gold, right? That was a thrill. If you made the B-side, that was a thrill. So if you got the single, it was a miracle. It was a really tough competition, So that was different. The other thing that was different about Motown, which was just so sacred to people like myself, someone could go in and take your multi-track recording and mess with it, remix it, overdub on it. They screwed up a couple of Temptation songs that it just killed me. There's nothing I could do about it, And even the Temptations came to me and said, well, why'd you do that? I said, I didn't do that, So anyway, we weren't making a whole lot of money for the Motown at that point. We never got any singles that I know of. And then at that point, the scratching record had not come out. It was a huge, huge hip-hop hit. I didn't even know it because I never listened to hip-hop music. And we never got paid any money on it until maybe 6, 7 years ago, got a little bit. So they gave us $25,000 to get out of our deal. And so I said, what do you want to do now? I said, well, let's build a recording studio. And that's when we built Wishbone across the street from the airport. I was coming down Avalon, and I saw this underground sewer pipe place. That's what they made. And there's about a 6-foot diameter sewer pipe sitting out in the front yard. And I said, oh, echo chamber, no parallel walls, hard surfaces. Rick had one of the best echo chambers I've ever seen and the best Telefunken microphone ever made. And so I called a fraternity brother up. I knew his daddy made these underground gasoline tanks. And I said, what's the largest gasoline tank, underground tank you make? And he said, well, he said, it's 13,000 gallons. Well, I don't know what that meant, dimension-wise, but I think it was, if I remember, it's about 13 feet long and 9 feet in diameter. I said, can you put a manhole in the top and blow out the ends to where they're not parallel? So he brings the thing up. We bury it behind the studio. It's still back there, isn't it, Billy? I think buried under some slabs or something.
You're going to get the eco people out there.
Oh, no, sorry about it. It's not really there. It was at one time. So we had a good relationship with the police in Muscle Shoals, and I remember when they put the big badge with the platinum record on their cars. It called it Hit Recording Capital of the World. I thought that was really cool. So they came out and they shot their gun over the manhole, and we timed it, and it echoed for 13 seconds. That's unbelievable. So how those things work, you'd send the sound down there, and you'd have speakers down there, and then you'd have 2 microphones placed, and then you'd blend that echoed sound in with the original signal. And this is before we had electronic echo and EMTs and all that kind of stuff. So we had a unique sound.
All right, so you told me yesterday when we spoke, you had all these great stories about, and Motown, you have to understand, I grew up just outside of Motown. I'm originally from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So for me as a child, people like Quincy Jones, Berry Gordy, these were the music legends and heroes that I grew up. And my life brought me here to Muscle Shoals, where I got the second half of my music education. And I mean, you had some really, really great stories, but it's amazing that just in the decade or so, barely a decade, that you were doing all of this work. It wasn't long before in 1975, you went to University of North Alabama and began the commercial music business degree. Why did you do that?
Well, I'll tell you what, since you brought up Motown, let me tell you that.
Okay, we got more Motown stories. I'm not going to say no.
Berry Gordy was a genius, right? And he's always messing with you. Either that or he's putting you to a test, or you'd have a serious meeting with him in the office, and he's telling me about stuff how he did with this Marvin Gaye. But one time we were in the studio with the Temptations doing vocals, and we get this call, Barry wants you at the Bel Air house. Now, he had a house down in Malibu and one in Bel Air. He had Red Skelton's old house. And bring songs for Diana Ross and Jermaine Jackson. I mean, you're talking about embarrassing. I got to tell the Temptations, I'm sorry, we got to leave. And we were on what I called protest trip, so we rented a light blue Pinto. Right? So I'd never been to Barry's Bel Air house, and we drive up there, and these iron gates, and the 2 guys come out with machine guns, right? And it's a little intimidating. But I figured in a blue Pinto, they're not going to worry about us. We go up there, all the Rolls Royces are sitting around and stuff, and we go in there, and here's the whole A&R department there. And they all had these little tape recorders. I don't know whether you remember, some of you old enough, they were about like this, and they had a little push-button thing, and you could record or play back on them, and they're about $29 or something. I didn't have one. This is Berry Gordy. You think I'm going to forget what he says? That's not why they brought the tape recorders. They record him because he might forget what he said. And I didn't realize that. So anyway, we go through this whole bit about Diana Ross song and all that. And then all of a sudden he clears the room. Everybody out but Clayton and I. And he opens up this door, and we go in, and this is the most immaculate dining room you have ever seen. Now, I'm kind of getting the feeling we might be set up. You know what I mean? Why is he running everybody out? And we go in there, and we sit down at the table, and I'm looking down. I mean, the silverware and all this stuff. There's 5 forks. And I said, oh, my God, 5. I'm thinking about something. I can figure out 3. Clayton, maybe 2. Remember, he's from North Florida, the Panhandle. And we used to look at each other. We could communicate just by looking at each other. We worked together so long. And I'm thinking, oh, we'll just watch Barry, see what he does, right? So in comes these Chinese waiters, right? And they're bringing us okra, greens, beef stew with carrots and potatoes, right? And I don't remember if there was corn on the cob or not. I can't remember which one it was. But I'm watching Barry. Clayton's watching Barry. We're watching each other. And Barry takes his napkin and he puts it up under his shirt, and he reaches down with his hands and picks up that food with the 5 forks sitting there. So Clayton and I took our napkin, we just tucked it in, we tucked it in our shirt, and I picked up those carrots and potatoes and we ate them, right? So while we're in the meal, he gets a call from Sly Stone. Now there's this guy next to me over here on the left. I won't mention him because he's the one that messed up my Temptations record. And Sly's wanting to be on Motown. And he looks at that guy and he says, what do you think about, after he gets on the phone, what do you think about getting Sly on Motown? He's a black artist. He needs to be on Motown. It's a black thing. Then Barry looks at me and said, what do you think? And I'm thinking, uh-oh, test time. I said, well, first of all, he's on drugs. He's got radio mad at him. They won't play his records, and he's not showing up for concerts. I think it's a green thing, and I wouldn't do it until he straightens up. I took a risk. He didn't ask Clayton. I think he stopped right there for some reason, you know. Well, anyway, that was that story. The other one is my favorite Motown story, although I got a lot of them, was Stevie Wonder. His office was right across from Billie Jean Brown's, where we hung out, and Billie Jean's name was the one used for Billie Jean Michael Jackson. And she came from Detroit. You know, she'd been with him from the beginning. Cool person, quality control head. So it's time for Stevie to play the new album, which happened to be his huge album for Stevie Wonder. And nobody ever heard any of his music until it's time to hear it. You know, it's finished. No input from anybody else. He runs the show. So he's in, the president of Motown at that time was a guy named Ewart Abner. And Abner was also Stevie Wonder's personal manager and had been for 10 years. And president of Motown. So here is the meeting to play the album. All the A&R guys are there. Salespeople are there. And Stevie's starting to play the album. And Abner gets a phone call. Now, I can tell you right now, Stevie Wonder knew who you were by the sound of your walk. If he'd ever heard it 2 or 3 times, he knew who we were. Abner decides he's going to sneak out, take that phone call. Oh, that was a big mistake. And he sneaks back in, and after the album's over, Stevie says, well, Abner, what'd you think about it? Oh, Stevie, it's just great. It's just great. So, next thing you know, Stevie Wonder disappears. For 2 weeks, nobody knows where Stevie Wonder is, and Abner is really sweating it. You know, it's like... So Stevie comes into Billie Jean's office incognito, right? And Clayton and I are in there hanging out, and he looks at Clayton and I and says, when I point to you, I want you to say, bye, Stevie Rolls, bye, Stevie Rolls. I said, okay. So he gets on the phone, he calls Abner, he said, and he starts singing this song he wrote for Abner, that him not showing up and how bad he was and on and on and on. And then he'd point to us and we'd say, bye, Stevie Rolls, bye, Stevie Rolls. So the song's over and he hangs up, and Abner still doesn't know where he is. Next morning, silver clad at Stevie Rolls, Rolls Royce at Stevie Wonder's front door. I bet many people don't know that story.
Oh, it's going to be in some Stevie Wonder bio, I promise you.
Might, I don't know.
Right, we're lucky enough. I mentioned the commercial music business degree, and Dr. Janet Malone is here, and that is your department, right? Commercial music, yes. So she's currently in the department that you started back in the mid '70s. Why? What led you to want to create that program at UNA?
Well, I saw a lot of creative young people get taken advantage of. There wasn't any school for it, to my knowledge, and if they did, nobody ever told me where it was. And so I thought, what a shame to see people. I mean, I could sign you to a publishing contract, and it cost me 50 cents. Big deal. And you're thrilled. Oh, I've got a publishing contract. And there was never enough in the music business. You get a song published, then you get it recorded, and then maybe it's a chart record. You always want more. Then it's maybe top 50 or top 10 or gold, platinum. It's like the old Peggy Lee song. Is that all there is? It's never enough, right? So I went to this guy up in Nashville he had one class that he was teaching, and he was a really cool guy. He also knew the whole workings of how universities work. And I said, do you think we could have a 4-year degree program there? he said, well, let me meet with your school people. He met with them. So anyway, I decided I could cover the record industry with 4 classes. I know that my first class had 120 students. I said, oh, can't do that. Can't do that. Too many people. And so I told Dr. Simpson, I said, let's top it at 60 if possible. And I remember my first thing I would always say to every student, one thing, and that was, you're going to have to compete with the world, and you're going to have to compete with me. So I'd like to read you some of these people who competed with me and outdid me because they've been really successful. And so I thought I'd read off their list. Also, I remember Jerry Wexler. So he came to guest speaker. We had Glenn Fry and the Herman's Hermits and all these guest speakers coming in because they'd be here to record, and they loved to come over there because it wasn't threatening to them, you know. And they like to talk about themselves. As you can see, people in the music industry like to talk about ourselves. So anyway, Jerry Wexler said, good guys finish last in the music business. And I was horrified when he said that. I'm trying to tell them how they need to be, you know, good people and all this stuff. And anyway, so I thought I'd read off some of them. I'm sure I'm leaving people out. It's just, you know, my excuse is my old age and you forget. But first on the list is James Counts, drummer, music store owner, present. Randy Poe, who was the guest speaker here a couple of months ago, president of Lieber and Stoller, vice president of Songwriters Hall of Fame. Now, these people have a lot more credits than I'm giving them, right? But Marcus Hall, songwriter, CEO, Fame Studios and Publishing. Walt Aldridge, hit songwriter, educator, and award-winning poet. Nancy Lee Brown, business manager of Kenny Chesney, and publisher and studio manager for David Briggs and Norbert Putnam. Milton Sledge, studio drummer and drummer for Garth Brooks and a lot more. Richard Butler, hit songwriter and music publisher. Tim Harlan, cinematographer for hit series Hometown, if you're familiar with that TV show. John Briggs, vice president of ASCAP and a bank vice president. My favorite, one of my favorites, Nemi Dukes Holland. She worked for CNN, EMI Capitol Records as a publicist, and she's a world-class dog breeder and lives in London, England, and her dog is Sarah Suma Maltese. I think I pronounced that right. Coy Fulmer, hit Christian songwriter, Dove Award winner. Mark Nairmore, performer and hit songwriter. Joey Flippin, who's with us, right? Hit studio player and record store owner. Mary Beth McLemore, she was a sound engineer and she's written hit books. Is that cool? Tony Edwards, band and choir director and musician. Special needs children companion. And Dell Edwards, a music teacher. Daryl Glover, a musician, owns a recording studio, independent record label, educator. Daryl's here. Who was it? Did you look like a Leon Russell? Stan Muncie, hit songwriter. Clay Myers, Nashville music consultants. Eddie Alexander, here from Nashville. That's cool. He also did his practicum at our studio, if I'm not mistaken, and you took my daughter around the high school and stuff.
Yes, I did.
There you are. Mitch McGee, hit songwriter. Jeff Quillen, studio owner and band leader for 40 years. And Kevin Lamb, vice president of Southern Publishing.
And the work that you put into that department still exists today, and it's still, you know, producing people that are going to make that list so much longer.
Yeah, it's changed a lot since back then too. I mean, certainly you can't smoke as many cigarettes as I did. I'd have 2 or 3 going at the same time.
All right, well, let's jump back over to your work with Wishbone. You got bought out of Motown. You opened Wishbone Studios. What would you say the advantages were at becoming the owner of your own studio?
Well, first of all, again, as I told you, we would find artists like Mac McAnally or the group Hot and FCC. I don't know whether Wayne Chaney made it or not. And we would speculate on, we'd use our money, right, to produce these artists. Now, if you own the studio, that's a big percentage of the money you're going to have to spend to speculate. When we first started out, we had to rent other studios. Also is we knew that if anybody's going to hire us to produce records, we need great songwriters. And we had great songwriters. To give you some idea, Robert Byrne, Mac McAnally, Richard Butler, Donnie Lowry, Brandon Barnes, Barbara Wyrick, Wayne Chaney, Dennis Clifton in the group FCC, Jesse Boyce and Bottom and Company. Really great songwriters and good artists as well. During the time at Wishbone, that first 12 months, we produced the trio from California, a black girl, a Mexican girl, a white girl from California, and we produced the record Angel in Your Arms. And Angel in Your Arms was a million-selling song, obviously a million performance song, Song of the Year, and held the record for being on the Billboard charts for 13 years, longer than any other single. Then it was a country hit later by Barbara Mandrell. And then Mac McAnally, It's a Crazy World. We did 4 albums on Mac. I was his personal manager. I never charged him a penny for being his personal manager. We were also his publisher, and I should tell you that story because nobody ever tells you the true stories. I think they try to embellish them, but his story's so real. I mean, the real one's better. Steve Moore is the guy that really discovered Mac McAnally, and Steve Moore was one of our engineers. And Steve kept saying, "You got to hear this guy from Mississippi, this kid, doesn't he?" I haven't got time. You know, I don't do that. I got screeners, right? He kept saying, "You got to hear this guy." So about 3 months passes, and finally he hires Mac to play on a demo, play acoustic guitar on a demo, a country demo. And he's got me trapped. So he brings Mac in, and if you ever see the early pictures of Mac, you know, he had a head of hair on him, excuse me there. And he plays it, the first song he plays, It's a Crazy World. And I thought, God, you know, how old are you? He's 19. And then he played what is on the whole first album. I made him play those songs over and over. I just could not believe what I was hearing. I said, how old were you? We wrote these. He said, 15. Now, we had Joan Carroll Butler, who was a young teenager, who was a really great singer-songwriter, too, but she decided she didn't want to be in the music business anymore. So anyway, we signed him and produced an album on him, and you know, had It's a Crazy World was top 6 in the adult contemporary charts. So that's how he's really discovered. It was like, and I think one thing is important to know, if you're a songwriter, don't make the mistake I made with Jerry Wexler or Al Cederholm made. Make sure that sucker, if you get an opportunity to play it for somebody that can do something with it, artist, producer, whatever, make sure it's good. Make sure it's great, and test it on people. And the way you test a song on somebody is you don't tell them the title, you don't tell them the little story about the song, you just play it. And then you say, well, first, if they ask you to play it again, you're on to something. Then you ask them, well, do you know the title? Because they need to know what the title is, because the public's got to know what it is to buy it or find it, right? And then you're on to something. Then you can play it to somebody that can do something for you. If not, you may never get it heard. You may never be able to play that person a song again. It's like Jerry Wexler. I'm lucky even. It was the real cartoon with the finger up his nose that got him, I'm sure. Or the titles. So during my career at Wishbone, I produced, and prior to that, 47 albums and 86 singles projects. Clayton was usually the session leader on all of them, except the ones I produced by myself. And I engineered all the vocals and all the remixing. And in the early years, I did the basic tracks and the other stuff. But after a while, I realized I can't engineer and focus on that and try to be a producer at the same time, which is why I got engineers. And we had really great engineers. I've got my list here of my engineers somewhere and paid something.
That's right.
Alan Schulman.
Isn't that it? No, that's
No,
not. That's
Alan
not.
Schulman, Lee Daly. Let me find my list. I don't want to leave anybody out. So, Hershey Reeves, yeah. Hershey was also one of our songwriters, by the way, really good songwriter and singer. He's a church guy over at Huntsville, I think, now. So I can't find my songwriter or my engineer list, but anyway, and I'll run across it here in a second. And so keep in mind, we were speculating on artists, so we'd get budgets $100,000, which is equivalent to $700,000 now. So we weren't like Muscle Sound. They rented the studio, they played on the things, but we got front money and a percentage of it sold. And so we felt like that was the best way for us, and that was why it was important for us to build the studio.
Well, 80 to 83.
Okay.
Terrible recession.
Yeah. That's the worst recession since World War II.
Labels were not signing new artists.
No, if you didn't sell 100,000 records, they wouldn't even keep you on the label. Now, that's how we made our money. It was speculating on artists, right? So we were in trouble. Then nobody wanted to buy new artists. And the other problem was the interest rate. The interest rate had gone up as high as 21%, if you can believe that. And if you happen to be on floating interest, if you people know it, business people know what I'm talking about, you're paying. We had to pay 3 over prime because we're in the music business. So we're paying 25% interest on the studio, on the equipment, right? And then in 1981, we had a fire. Great. And for some reason, the night we had that fire, the fire chief died of a heart attack. I mean, it's good, you know. Our studio took over a year to rebuild, get rid of the smoke damage. It took a month before we were allowed to open the doors because they want to make sure it wasn't arson, right? And they find out that it's some ballast overheated in a fluorescent light fixture and fell on the desk and there was smoke damage in the control room. I remember coming back from what we called the pit grill back then. We were out hanging out, and I came back and I saw the fire coming out of my office, and I started to open that back door, and the door was rumbling. I said, if I open that door, it's going to kick me. No telling how far. So I go around to the front. I come in the studio. I open the front door. I get into the control room, shut the doors off. I turn around, and here comes the smoke from the other side of the building. It hit me right in the face. Now I know what it's like when people die in fires. It's not the flames that get you, it's you can't breathe. You can't breathe in, you can't breathe out, you're just frozen. So I got down on the floor and I crawled out of the studio. I put, my shirt thing over my mouth trying to filter out the smoke and ash. Well, anyway. So now I got no income except for our publishing company. And the publishing company back then was bringing in around, grossing about $300,000 a year. And we had Old Flame that was still out there doing it and this kind of thing. So it was going to increase. So I go to the bank in Florence and I said, I'd like to get a line of credit. The problem was we had 80-20 insurance, which means they're only going to pay 80% of the market value of your losses. Now, that means also 80% of what it's going to cost to rebuild where the fire had damaged, and on equipment, 80% of market value. Now, it took probably 3 months just to track down the market value of all this equipment, and I didn't have it videoed. I mean, you do dumb things. Now I know. Of course, I ain't got anything worth that now, so it doesn't really make a difference. But so I go to the bank, and remember, it's floating interest. And so we said, okay, you take all the publishing royalties into your bank, take out your payments, give us our publishing royalties, and anything else we need to borrow to fix this studio up, and, So they did it. And then came 1985, right? That was what you would say was the big year.
That was the big year. That was the year that the Alabama Music Hall of Fame, all that whole project started.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
It was the first induction banquet for the Alabama Music Hall of Fame.
Well, 80 to 85 is Alabama Music Hall of Fame. Tell us the story about, go back to the beginning of the Amhoff and who you pulled together to make that happen.
All right, here's the thing. when you're gone for 27 years like I was, and you come back and you hear history not like it was the way you remember it, but I know the person who came up with the idea for the Alabama Music Hall of Fame was not the Muscle Shoals Music Association who had this dream, right? It was a guy who wrote a column for the Times Daily called Knight's Desk, and his name was Ben Knight. And Ben Knight he had also won a Pulitzer Prize for that thing down in Phoenix, Alabama, when all that corruption was going on down there and stuff. So he was a sharp guy. And he had been doing a little research. He said, there are so many hit recording artists and famous people from Alabama, there ought to be an Alabama Music Hall of Fame. And he approached Lola Scobie. You ever heard of her? She was the executive director of the Alabama Music Hall of Fame. I've never seen her name anywhere. And so we got Governor Wallace to appoint, I was the chairman of the Alabama Music Hall of Fame, and he appointed these other people, a couple of them from Montgomery, David Johnson, Jimmy Johnson, and Rick Hall were the locals, and me. And so we're the board. And so I went to Milwaukee and met with Miller Beer, and we got Miller to do a big promotion where every can of beer they sold, money goes to Alabama Music Hall of Fame. And they did it was really cool. And then we went to McDonald's, state of Alabama. McDonald's, every burger, we get so much money goes to the Alabama Music Hall of Fame. And then Randy and Owen and I got on this private plane. We went down to the Capitol and got on the steps. I would just anything, get attention to the Alabama Music Hall of Fame. And met with these architects. We even went to Disney World to meet with the robotics people and to see what they were doing and their venues, because originally the Alabama Music Hall of Fame was supposed to have an indoor place to perform and a library. That never came about. But so it was a cool thing. I thought the idea for the Alabama Music Hall of Fame was a cool thing, but I had to give a tour the other day for some people from TVA that were from Chattanooga. And they were engineers, and I hadn't met them or anything. And I thought to myself, they're engineers, they're probably 40s, maybe 30s, I don't know. Do they even know who Alabama is? Do they even know what a vinyl record is? I'll tell you what, I moved to Colorado Springs in 1991, and my grandkids, their kids, he was in the military, so they're everywhere. Idaho, oh God, North Carolina. So I'd take one grandkid at a time and fly them to Colorado Springs so they get to know their granddaddy. Anyway, Emily is my middle granddaughter. This is 20 years ago, right? Now, I got this big room. I lived up in the mountains, and I had platinum records and pictures of all the people that were famous at the time. And I'm thinking, she's going to be so impressed with her granddaddy. You could see. So she's about 10. She comes through the door, and on the left is this Alabama thing with 6 platinum albums on it, from a couple of songs we had on there. And she looks up and she says, you know what they look like, right? She said, Granddaddy, I didn't know they made CDs that big. And all of a sudden I realized I'm getting old. So these TVA guys, my tour was, here's what the music business was all about. The royalties and how the things were. Because I've had big talks with Sam Phillips. I'm so old, I know a lot of these people, that are already gone. And so I realized that they need to get some kind of a new way to get more, I also found out if you don't live in the state of Alabama for 30 years, you can't be in it if you're not born here. I don't know about that. A lot of people get left out that shouldn't be, I think. But anyway, beside the point. The other thing that happened in 1985 was the commercial music business thing. Was their, 10th anniversary then. What else?
I was going to say in '85 you worked with WQLT.
That's true.
And you had a bunch of artists come together on a record called "We Are the Shoals."
There it is.
Right there.
There's people on here that I'll bet you know.
Can
There's one right over there.
I read some of the names on that? Would you mind?
Sure.
Just a couple of names.
She
on
brings
here.
all the cookies.
You'll know these names. I've heard Ava Aldrich, Walt Aldrich, obviously, Gary Baker. Let's see, Jimmy Johnson's on here. See Marie Thomason, Marie Louie.
Yeah.
I worked with her. Nelson Starkey. All these names. These are amazing. Charlie Burgess. I mean, I looked at this yesterday. I'm like, oh, there's Lenny LeBlanc. I missed his name yesterday. All of these people. How many artists is this?
107.
107.
What they did is you would, once you tell them, you auditioned, right? What'd you have to
I had to
do?
be the designated caller for QOT, and I had to sing, "Take this job and shove it." When I won.
So they picked people from all walks of life, 107. And we had them out in the studio, and what we did is Brandon Barnes did the track, and we copied We Are the World track. And then some of the more Mac McAnally, some of those people would do the solo parts. We did it just like We Are the World, except that We Are the Shoals. And the idea was to bring the cities together. Man, that didn't work. Never going to happen. So anyway, WQLT won National Radio Promotion of the Year in small markets for that particular thing. And also it was videoed. And you can see that video of all these people on YouTube. And I think it's called We Are the Shoals.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Another really, really big thing that we cannot let slip our attention. In 1985, you created the Heartbeat Lullaby recordings. And when you told me that story yesterday, I was fascinated. Utterly fascinated. So we're going to dive into that. 85, you create the Heartbeat Lullaby recordings. Why did you do that?
Okay. You remember when Parisians used to have this big arts festival over in Huntsville? Remember Parisians? I know some of you are old enough. Well, they asked me to be a judge for the arts festival for whatever these people were. And this woman who was assigned to me to show me around Huntsville, like I need to be shown around Huntsville, was a daycare recreational therapist. She said, the music we have for kids is so condescending. Could you make, some music for our kids? And I'm thinking, come on. I didn't say this, but I'm thinking it. I'm a big-time record producer. We don't make songs for kids. They don't get played on the radio. I mean, that's all you know, right? But I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, one thing that's cool, we could do a Christmas song. All record producers, singers, everybody wants to do Christmas songs, right? Because they get played every year after year after year. So I got Marie and them to sing Christmas songs, and what we did is we had a track on one side of the cassette, and then on the other side we had Jingle Bells and those kind of songs. So the kids could sing. That wasn't done, I don't think, at that time, like they do now, where you can get a track and sing along with it. And we sent it out to 150 daycare centers in Alabama. And we got back 150 positive responses. Blew my mind. 2-inch high lettering. Thank you, Mr. Woodford. Could you make more music for us? Now, that moved me. I don't get it. Nobody pays attention to the credits in America. They do in Europe. And, if you're a producer, so what? What is that? So I thought, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, what is music for daycare? What am I going to do for these kids? And I thought, well, nap time, right? So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'll just use songs like Rockabye Baby and Mary Had a Little Lamb. Some of these songs are 300-400 years old. And there's some of the worst singers in the world been putting babies to sleep with them. The mamas, right? Or dads. But I thought if Jimmy Johnson and Rick Hall find out that I'm producing lullabies, they'll think he is on the way out. He is desperate. And 85 was bad. Muscle Shoals sold their studio and everything to Malaco in 1985. So I decided to record the human heart from the chest, right where a baby lays its head. Now, I forgot a couple of things, and one is that the heart doesn't beat in tempo. I've got to have it in tempo to use it as the rhythm of the traditional nursery songs. I had the singers rocking little dolls. It was like, and of course my songwriters are not too pleased with this at that point. So, what are you doing? And it was hard to, So anyway, I had it tested. Dr. Canaroo over at Helen Keller decides he'll test it in his lobby, and so he couldn't believe these kids that were normally in there crying. He played the music, he stopped crying, so he decides to test it in the newborn nursery. And they tested 59 babies over a 6-week period, and 94% of crying babies stopped crying in less than 2 minutes when he played the music. And I'm thinking, well, that's an A, but so what? And all babies cry in the newborn nursery. Then I got a call, my friend Eddie Parker in Huntsville, who he and I have been friends for 40, 50 years. He did a lot of TV, WH&T over there, and videographer. We did video projects together. He had a friend in high school who was a cardiac recovery unit nurse at UAB in Birmingham, and he gave one of the cassettes to her. I get a call from the head nurse at the cardiac recovery unit and said, we'd like to talk to you about your heartbeat lullabies. I said, okay, and I figured I'm going to meet him in the office, you know. And I go down there, and they take me in the cardiac recovery unit, and I almost passed out. I saw little babies cut from the neck to their belly button and tubes and monitors, and these nurses are scurrying around, and I had to put my head down between my legs. It was awful. I mean, I don't mean it that way, it's just for me. I have to turn my head when they take my blood, okay? So they couldn't wait to play it. So they hit the boom box, on comes London Bridge. Now this little baby's heart rate's going a little over 200 and something. And the heart rate starts coming down within 15 seconds, and it freaked me out. I could feel, whether you believe this, it doesn't matter to me. I could feel the presence of God in that room. And it was like a paradigm shift. It was like, this is how you're supposed to be making music. Look what I can do with a lullaby. So, the nurses said, could you do us a favor? And I said, what do they want? I'll do anything, you know. Could you make some more songs, because we're tired of hearing these 5 that you got, and could you be able to play it lower and it still be effective? Well, now my engineering took in, so I bought it. I'm all excited to come back, try to tell people what I saw. How do you tell it? I'm trying to tell it now without showing the videos. So I got a piece of PVC sewer pipe, 4 inches diameter, put a 4-inch speaker in it because that'll have good bass response, so you can play it at a lower volume and hear the heartbeat, right? And I took all that down there, and there's a picture of it somewhere. I don't know where it is, but it'll come up. And so I will go ahead and tell this quickie story. I started adding songs, you know, back and forth to Birmingham. And I was on a television talk show in Tampa, and this person called me and said, we saw you on this talk show, Murphy in the Morning, and could you, we're doing a research project looking for alternatives to physical restraints and sedatives in nursing homes. And I'm thinking, physical restraints? I didn't know they did that kind of thing, right? I said, well, sure. So I sent them the CD, or cassette, I think at the time, cassette player and all that. And that same week, I get a call from Lutheran Medical Center in Cleveland, Ohio, and they said, we'd like to try your baby's music in our geriatric unit. Well, I don't know what a geriatric unit is. I know it has to do with old, right? I said, okay. I sent them up there. And so I called UAB in Birmingham. I said, how about music for your adults after open heart surgery? I said, do you think we could do that? He said, well, we'll ask the surgeons, patients, see if it's okay. Well, so I thought, you know, this is how music therapy people think, which I'm not one of. I'll just use music when these people were teenagers, right? In the 40s. Amazing Grace, Moon River, Laura's Theme, Scarlet Ribbons, you know, those songs, right? But I won't have any singers. And now I've got it down to a science, you know. I've got the heart rate, heartbeat stored on a digital sampler, and I can do it quick. So I sent it to UAB in Birmingham, and I sent it to Cleveland, Ohio. It was too late for the Tampa, Florida one. And I waited 3 months, and I hadn't heard anything, and I said, come on, you know, how can this miss? Everything's the same, it's just the songs. So I called UAB in Birmingham and said, well, how's it going? And they said, well, we're sorry, but we cannot use your adult version. The first thing goes through my mind, they made a mistake, the surgeons wouldn't let them do it. I said, well, what's the problem? And they said, well, you've spent a lot of time here. You know we bring the patients in right after the surgery, and they're laying there, and we've got the boom box there, and we're playing the music, but a lot of times the anesthetic wears off before the paralyzation wears off. So these people are laying there, they can't feel anything, and they can't move, they're paralyzed, but they can see and they can hear, and on comes Amazing Grace. They think they're dying. And it doesn't look like heaven, you know. You talking about embarrassed. I mean, it never even dawned on me, but I'm not giving up that quick. So I called Cleveland, the geriatric unit, right, and I said, well, how's it going? She said, I'm sorry, we can't use your adult music. I said, oh, okay, Amazing Grace, right? She said, no, the problem's Moon River. I said, what's wrong with Moon River? And she said, do you ever listen to oldie radio? And I said, well, yeah, that's about the only place I can hear my stuff anymore. She said, you hear that song, you remember the first time you heard it, who you were with, you can almost relive that experience. That ever happened to you? She said, you don't know why these people are in here, do you? And I said, well, no, I just know they're old. She said, we're a referral hospital for about a 200-mile radius of nursing homes. And she said, if you don't get visitors in nursing homes, that's why they're here. And I'm thinking, what is she talking about? I said, what do you mean? She said, if you don't get visitors, you don't get as good a care. She said, tell your kids, which I have, right? If you're ever in a nursing home, you make surprise visits to your daddy because I want to get better care. So she said, she said, your baby thing is just working great, because she said, when they hear that, they flash back to a time when they were either calming their young, or they were being calmed and they were being shown love, affection, security, and made to feel safe. She said, it's working great. Well, I knew at that time that it worked on adults, but I'm too wrapped up in the neonatal units and the pediatrics and MRI, nuclear medicine, and all this stuff. And I'm going around hospitals. Once we moved to Colorado Springs in '91 to be more centrally located, I could travel cheaper, and I could hit most of the places in the United States. I spoke, did talk radio, TV, or made speeches in hospitals in 45 of the 50 states, in England and in Canada. I'm on a mission. So, but when we moved, I don't know where I am here, but when we moved to Colorado Springs.
I know where we are, it's okay. Well, I mean, you were in Colorado Springs, you were making these lectures with hospitals, nurses, and doing all of these different things. Obviously, you had your grandkids that were coming out, you know, and you were introducing them, making sure that you stayed connected to them. The period between 1985 and 1991, that was a major transitional period for you. I mean, you sold your business assets and all this. The Hall of Fame had its first inductions.
When I saw in the cardiac recovery, I said, this is what I want to do. Spread the word. Marilyn Eason, who went with me to Colorado Springs when we moved, now it's Marilyn Eason.
Lawson.
What was her last name? Lawson.
You'd know.
She married a Billy Lawson.
She said, this is the day after I came back from the cardiac recovery, and she said, what's happened to you? I said, what are you talking about? She said, you don't use the foul language you used to use. You haven't used one bad word. I used to lose a lot. That was what you did in the music business. That's how you described your records. And so I decided I wanted to get out of the music business. Things weren't going that great anyway. And so in order to do that, I had this line of credit, right? And I was going to sell the recording studio, the music publishing companies, which at that time, the way you figured it was, you take the 3 years and the average earnings for 1 year and multiply it by 7 or more. And that's what it was worth. So I'm going to sell that. I'm going to sell the log cabins, which were next door. And I should have enough money to start this new venture. But there was a person who was an employee of mine who had a different idea. And this is a kid that I had treated like a son. And so we were getting ready to calculate our current royalties for the songwriters, and we also had to come up with the annual figure, or the figure of how much earnings this company had, and the computer wouldn't work. We had a Radio Shack computer, if you can believe that. And we didn't know what to do. We were computer illiterate. I still am, pretty much. But my dad had some friends over at NASA who were computer wizards, and they took their private plane and they flew over to the studio, and in 20 minutes they said, somebody has erased 4 lines out of your program and his name is, which we won't go into who it is. And I thought, oh, that is really terrible. Well, the same guy went over to the bank in Florence that I'd borrowed my line of credit money, and at this point it was up to about $640,000, and tells the banker, the loan officer, that I'm on drugs and that I'm not really trying to sell this publishing company. Now, but he would sell the publishing company for them for 10%. Now, what he didn't realize was that the banker's an Auburn guy, right? And I'm an Auburn guy, and he came and told me the whole thing. And he said, I've seen people come in like this, crazed, look in their eye. He said, that's illegal. And he said, not only that, we don't own those copyrights to sell them. That is the arrangement we had. So, however, there were some higher ups in the bank that they didn't know for sure whether he's telling the truth or not, but they freaked out and they called my loan, which meant that the royalties that were coming in, that they would take their payments out of and send me the balance, they're keeping it all. So now I got no income. And I got Bank Independent that I owe the equipment on, and I've got First Federal Savings and Loan for the building, and I can't remember which one had the cabins. And I don't have any money to make the payments, right? So I filed for Chapter 11 to free up the money from the bank in Florence. But it takes time, 3-4 months. So by that time, in default on all my other loans, and they call their loans. And I got no income. So I got to sell everything as quick and as cheap as I can. I lost everything. My home. And the hardest part, I think of all, not hard really, because is they took my car, and I had my Synergy tag on the back of it. I lost my tag too. And so, anyway, so I had to start this new company with no money and still in debt. But within 6 months, every creditor was paid except for one. So I was starting out that way. But so I'm driving from Birmingham to Atlanta to go to a hospital over there. And all of a sudden, I'm driving by myself. It's raining. I never forget it. And I don't know whether there's any Christians out there, but have you ever been convicted by the Holy Spirit? It's a scary thing, because you all of a sudden you realize all these people you might have done something wrong and said some bad things to, and you better be forgiving these people who've wronged you, or you can't move on with what you're doing. So I verbally and wrote all the people that I felt that had wronged me, including this culprit, and I told them I forgave them. And then I asked for forgiveness from everybody I could think of that I could still figure out how to contact, and asked for their forgiveness. And what was interesting about that is the ones that I asked for forgiveness, not one of them said they forgave me. And I thought, well, I guess what I'm doing is just giving them further justification, of what they did, So, well, we knew that we did the right thing, that kind of thing. But anyway, I knew that if I hadn't done that, I would be bitter for the rest of my life. I wouldn't have trusted anybody for the rest of my life. I saw this guy's wife, got assassinated. And when she said she forgave that guy, I knew what the deal was. She knew she had to do that, and I thought, oh, that takes a lot of guts. You have to figure out a way to do it. It's not like, I forgive you. You got to figure out a way to do it, but I did. So that was the 85 thing, and I think that the other thing is when we got to Colorado Springs, by that time we're on a roll. We got J.C. Penney's, Eckerd Drugs. We got corporations, BMW, these companies buying them, Amgen Corporation, giving them to their employees, right? And so we're hot. I had 13 employees. And all of a sudden, JCPenney, which we'd been in 11 years, and Eckerd Drug Stores, which were in 1,100 of those, dropped us. We didn't know why, right? Just took us out. So I'm having an emergency meeting with my employees. I had a new girl who was the receptionist. I said, do not interrupt this meeting. We're trying to, important meeting. So we're sitting, we're supposed to figure out what are we going to do. We just lost about 60% of our business. 5 minutes into the meeting, she called. She said, I know I'm not supposed to interrupt, but this guy said a woman said she's from the Pentagon. And I said, I know that's one of my friends doing that. They used to do that stuff all the time. I used to get calls from the Rolling Stones, just different people. And I said, well, you tell the Pentagon, I'll call them back. So after our 3-hour meeting, we come up with nothing. And I look at the phone call. I don't recognize the area code, which usually I know the area codes pretty well. I call back, and they answered the Pentagon. I like to fell out of my chair. I said, oh, my God. My family's all military but me. I mean, really. We worked with Westmoreland, if you remember them, some of you older people. All kinds of F-104 test pilots, and all these were my military family. I thought maybe they did something. Well, I don't know. He said, well, let me contact you with Army Community Service. Well, okay. So she says, we heard about your music and it prevents infant abuse. I didn't know that, you know. Oh, yeah. Could you quote us on $50,000? And I'm thinking, I could do that in a minute, but I'm going to be cool. I'm going to wait 2-3 hours. So I call her back and I quoted on $50,000. And we got an order. She said, I have to make you a GSA, government supply person. Then we got an order from the Navy and the Air Force and the Coast Guard. And, you know, it was just to hell with JCPenney's. Excuse the language. And I thought, this is really cool. We ship to one location, everything, right? We didn't have to worry about them. When you're dealing with JCPenney's and Eckerd's and these big chains, Marshall Fields, they send you back books, candy bars, all kinds of stuff, and charge it against what you sold them. Try to straighten that out if you're a little bitty company. Because the big companies just eat it. You know, so what? You know, they're making so much money off of them. So I used to go to the military bases and make speeches. I could tell you really funny stories there, particularly Vandenberg Air Force Base, where I almost got killed not knowing I'm going in the wrong gate. So anyway, that was a fun thing. In Hawaii, I spoke over there at Tripler and got to see Pearl Harbor, where my dad came in World War II. So anyway, it took me on a lot of, cool trips and places all over the United States. I'd speak to anybody, 2 people or 1,200 people. It didn't matter. You're on a mission.
Well, now these, your recordings, these heartbeat recordings,
Yeah.
they're still in circulation
Yes.
today. People can still get them today, right?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what happened. So, selling to the military will spoil you because they order such big quantities, and then it got to where I had to ship to different ones. But what happened is, all of a sudden, as you know, nobody has CD players anymore, right? Now, that's disaster for me. What am I going to sell the military to give to new parents through their new parent support program? I got nothing physical I can sell them. I came up with a speaker right here where you can feel it and hear the music. It's battery operated, but they can't afford to give every parent one of those. They're too expensive, They used to give away my book with a CD. Ross Pediatrics, which was a formula manufacturer, put 10,000 of them in books to give out to new mamas. One time I thought, they came out to Colorado Springs, and we're talking 2.5 million of these suckers to go out a year to new mamas. Their Meade Johnson competition to put the classical music CD in there, which, please. And so we came that close of getting that. And of course, I already imagined, this is like a big hit record, right? If you get, because it isn't like we get a percentage, we get it all. We own the record label, everything, right? So it didn't happen. But anyway, I've tried about everything you could imagine. I was on all kinds of TV shows and talk radio shows, and of course the ones you really remember, the ones where they were negative. I was in Canada in Vancouver, Canada. And this guy, he thinks I'm from California. He said, we don't like people from California, right? Come on, I'm this nice person that gives these free to your hospitals to use, right? I said, you know what? I said, I can relate to that. I said, we don't like people from California either because I'm from Alabama, right? And all of a sudden, it clicked. You know, then we could communicate again. But, that was, it took you all kinds of places, you know, where you go to expose what was going on with it. And then I get this call from some kids, and they'd had their dog, and it was in a coma, and they played their baby go to sleep CD, and the dog jumped up out of the coma, and, you know. And then it got intense. I started hearing from trainers, and this went on about how they were using the grandbaby CD to calm their dogs, and I'm thinking, come on. You know, these are probably people that dress their dogs up in clothes, try to give human characteristics on their dogs. So, and then I just said, well, I mean, you know, this is getting pretty intense. I'll write an article for the American Boarding Kennels Association and tell them, you know, I'll give you the CDs, just let me know if they work. So I took the baby CDs and I put a paper label on the CD and called it Canine Lullabies, Research Done on Human Babies First, which I hadn't told you about the research, but it's there. So, and I'm still not taking it too serious. Well, I get back 94% or 95% of them said reduce diarrhea in the cages, stop the barking, and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, why would they lie? I mean, you know, what's it?
Yeah, nobody ever lies about diarrhea.
Right.
Ever. No one lies about diarrhea.
But I'm still having a hard time believing it because I got no explanation for it. I can tell you about the babies. I can tell you all about babies, how to get them to sleep through the night, why Dr. Spock screwed up my generation, you know, all this stuff. But dogs, so I studied dogs. And I found out that dogs in their middle ear have the ability to screen out anything they want to screen out and focus on any one sound they want to hear. So if you've ever seen a dog in your living room, all the sound, TV's going, all of a sudden the dog jumps up, its ears are perking, and you can't hear anything, and you couldn't get their attention if you wanted to. They're focused on something. Well, anyway, so I gave some to the local humane societies and animal clinics, and I get this call from we had two humane societies, the No Kill and the Kill in Colorado Springs. And I get this call, we'd like some more of your canine lullabies. You know, I'd sent them out to them for Denver and other locations. How much? I said, well, I give them free for use in your facility. I always did that with hospitals or anybody, for use, right? If you want to buy them and give them to mamas, that's a different deal. Now, she didn't know we were only a mile and a half away because she called her 800 number. I said, would you like them hand delivered? I go down, I've never been in a humane society before. And I go in there, I start to tell her the story about the cardiac recovery unit. She didn't want to hear it. She said, these are my babies. You want to see it work? It was 2 PM. I said, well, yeah, you know. We go in there, and I'm walking down the aisle, and if you haven't ever been in one, the dogs are jumping and barking and peeing, and you know what I'm thinking, I don't feel too comfortable in this situation. And down at the end, she had a boom box, and she turns on the old trusty first song on the thing, London Bridge. Every one of those dogs laid down in their cages. I freaked out. I said, well, let me walk back down the aisle, keep the music going, let's see what happens. I figured they'll all jump up and start barking. Not one dog paid attention to me, and I thought, uh-oh. Now, I didn't know what that meant. Is that a good thing? I guess. I didn't know about kennel cough at that time. I didn't know about, you know, if you make these dogs more adoptable, if they're more friendly, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Well, anyway, so I knew then it worked on dogs. So I came up with new packaging for dogs, which I brought a sample here with me. And it's used now in about 3,500 humane societies and shelters here locally over in Florence. They bought the little speakers for their dogs. And I gave one to Culver County. Then I get a call from the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And they were using the heartbeat lullabies for people who had dementia or Alzheimer's extreme. And they played it twice a week for 30 minutes for 6 weeks. And the results were that it decreased the demented behavior and increased the cognitive abilities. And I remembered back to the Cleveland, Ohio, and the older people listening to it and stuff. And so then I knew that it does have an application for adults. I started, by the way, the advantage of being self-employed, I've been self-employed my whole life, except for the time we worked for Motown and we were actually self-employed with our company with them. So you can do whatever you want. I studied dogs, I studied Alzheimer's, I studied babies, all that, because I want to have an explanation. I want to be able to discuss what's going on here with people who don't think God intervened in my life. I probably shouldn't even bother with that, really. But, so here I am today. Nobody buys CDs anymore. This works on people with Alzheimer's. This works on dogs and cats, by the way. Even people tried it on elephants and parrots. I don't know what their results were. I'll tell you one result was Honolulu Zoo. They had these chimpanzees that broke out of glass at the zoo, and that's like $50,000 glass thing, And so they played it for these chimps, and the young ones, which are really aggressive, about 6, 8 years old, and it calmed the chimpanzees down. And there was a big article in the Honolulu News and all that stuff. Shortly after that, if you remember when that guy out in California who was so tight with the chimpanzees, and they came and just fixed him good. And I don't know whether you remember that. It's pretty bad. And so too bad they didn't have the music back then. So, trying to think if there's anything I need to, but
Well, tell you what, we're actually about to have to wrap this
all
up.
right.
Let's give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. You want that? We're going to do that? Anybody out here have any questions specific you want to ask Terry?
All us old guys, we get one of those copies, right?
Sure, I'll get you one. If you got a CD player.
Sir?
If you were going to start in the music business now, today, what aspect of it would you go for? How would you make a living in the music industry today?
Do you really want to know the truth?
Yes.
I wouldn't.
That was actually one of my questions.
I wouldn't do that for any reason. The music business is so bad now. It was bad back then, but it's worse now. It's not even music anymore. It's all computerized stuff. You ever heard of your really great guitar players now in the music? I mean, it's just, and the whole scene is just, I don't know. It's just, it was back when we were making music. It was cool. It was great because you're sitting in a control room, and when they hit that groove or whatever you want to call it, where everybody is feeling it just the same. You know what I'm talking about, Billy, right? It's such a good feeling. All the people that ought to know is David Hood, because they would hit that groove consistently on all kinds of artists, right? But not today. It's all computer. It's all move this verse over here and do this, and so where's and you don't have to be a musician to even play these things. And now with AI, I mean, I was over at Billy's the other day, and he said, "You know what he said, you ever heard of AI music?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I sent him these lyrics. That's all, or put it in whatever you do, right?" And he plays me this guy singing the whole arrangement of the tracks. He said they did that in 5 seconds, just from me sending the lyrics. Now, he couldn't use the vocal on it because he couldn't pronounce certain words right. Remember?
Yeah, I've tried it just to try it. I'm totally against it.
But they're going to be doing
They
that.
can't pronounce Chevrolet. They can't pronounce Screw for country.
Killed demos.
Yeah, and it was impressive. But the whole thing is, if you're a creative person, I mean, and I'm sure a lot of you are creative in a lot of different areas, there's something about creating things. Even my dad, I used to help him paint houses to make extra money. I still love to paint, because when you get through, you look at it and say, I did something there. I made that look better, and whatever it is. I tried painting one time. It was really awful, but I tried it, And so that whole thing about being a creative, there's all kinds of ways you can be creative, with plants and just all kinds of stuff. But to me, those people that are creating with the computers, they're infringing on another kind. Here's the other thing: the songs. If you're going to write a hit song, you need to move somebody emotionally somehow. And that was the advantage of being able to make those records back then. You could have a message that was so strong that you could move them, move them to tears, make them feel good, make them feel bad, make them feel sad, make them feel whatever, right? And so I think a lot of the reasons that young people go back and listen to that music from the 70s and 60s and 80s is because they made music that moved people. If I listen to country radio, no offense, I don't know whether you play that kind of stuff. They all sound kind of the same. And I know they said that about our music, our parents did, but it wasn't the same, right? But this has the same format. It has the same kind of sound. I pitched a song that Brandon Barnes and I wrote together recently to his Universal up in Nashville. And I know hit songs. It would have been a hit song. Somebody. It's called Second Chance or Second Thoughts. We're not interested. I said, why not? She said, that's not what's going on in country music today. It has to be up tempo. It has to be this, this, and this. And I thought, I didn't know because I'm not paying attention. And so it's like, and the other thing that's wrong with music today, in my opinion, is what happened. The Japanese and a lot of people bought these record companies, and they're not, quote, building copyrights. How do you build a copyright? You try to get as many people to record that song as possible. I'll tell you an example. There were these two girls in Nashville, Celia and, I can't remember her name, I'll think of it in a minute. They invited me to come up there. I wasn't doing country music much. And they wanted me to go to lunch with them with a friend, one of their songwriters. And I know what they're doing. They're setting me up to listen to his songs and all that stuff. And so I'm afraid they're going to ask me, well, are you familiar with any of his songs? And oh, God, I'm not going to be, at all, because I'm not into country music at that time, for sure. And so the first thing they say to me, and I've got to remember his name or it's going to ruin my whole story, but remember we were talking about, I can't remember names. I'll remember, okay, I got it. Johnny, tell him some songs you wrote, because I didn't know. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not into country music. Let's see, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Holly Jolly Christmas. I'm sitting with this guy, John Marks, a Jewish guy who wrote all these Christian Christmas songs, right? And I mean, it's got to be making millions of dollars every year. I mean, he wrote hit after country, Christmas songs, right? So that's called building copyrights. I remember when Randy Poe was here, he talked about Stand By Me, how much money it's bringing in a year today, $1 million a year. Why? Because so many people have cut it. It's been used in so many ways. You tell me one of these country music hits today that somebody covers.
It was a movie too, so.
Oh, and the movie on Stand By Me, yeah. So they're just not songs, they don't have real song value, in my opinion, and that's why nobody's going to record them. And you want a lot of, Angel and Yarns was cut, 25 different artists maybe, Loretta Lynn, just different ones. Theirs weren't big hits, but it all mounts up,
Any other questions, Grant?
In terms of audio, but not necessarily music, what are your thoughts on 432 resonant frequency earth? Are you familiar with that instead of 440?
Does anybody in this room other than Terry understand what he's saying? Just making sure that we haven't lost everybody.
Sorry, I totally went down.
It's kind of a biblical tune. It's before the Germans changed it to 440.
Well, my reason for asking this question is you probably relate to this. I don't actually listen to a whole lot of music because I'm working on music all the time. So podcasts, audiobooks, I a lot of times will sleep to the frequencies being played and things like that. Like migraines, there's certain frequencies that help alleviate migraines. And I've actually found it may be placebo effect, I don't care. It helps. So I've been doing some research into it and thinking about creating some of this really for myself and putting it out there. Are you familiar with A440 tuning?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'm familiar with.
All of those frequencies and how they...
Well, two things I can tell you guys. I was at a nurses conference in Lexington, Kentucky, a national meeting, and they had this guy his name was Flyberg. And Flyberg had this little oscillator kind of deal, and he did this talk to these nurses, and there's one other musician in there. I'm going to make a speech to them too, but I'm in the audience. And he's talking about dialing up different frequencies with different different things like that. And he had frequencies for every problem, liver problem. And I'm thinking, oh, come on, you know. And he talked about how it would vibrate the organs and on and on and on. And so, you know, the nurses are kind of, well, maybe, and the musician guy and I are looking at each other like, oh, this guy's so full of it, you know, and that was our thinking. He's banned in the United States, by the way, his stuff, but he was selling a lot in Canada and Europe because just the placebo effect, you know, he could sell these little devices that make these sounds with the earphones for $1,100. So, if you can't afford the $1,100 machine, he also has the sound stored in water. Now when he said that, I knew he's a hack. Come on, he's storing sound in water. Anyway, then there was these other people up in Virginia, and this was way back, and they had a thing called HemiSync. Are you familiar with that? And that was to help you go to sleep, and they had one frequency, I think one frequency off on the left and one frequency off on the right. I don't know whether that works or not, but they're still around, I think. And that's been 50 years ago, so I don't know. I mean, I kind of don't believe in sound vibrations causing stuff in and of themselves. I think what comes through your ears is more powerful as far as relaxing you or you know, come on. When I was in the high school band, I was last chair, right? Sheffield High School band. And whenever we'd march, like the Memphis Cotton Carnival, we had a long way to go. If you didn't have those drums playing, you ain't gonna make it, because it gave you stamina, right? And the playing gave you stamina. I remember on the complicated songs, except for the Sheffield Fight song, I would fake playing because I couldn't play it really. So I just pretend like I'm playing. And I played the clarinet, and nobody knew anyway if I was playing or not. You know what I mean? But I know one thing, it'll give you stamina. Music will. It can affect you in so many different ways, you know, the music going through your ears.
One of the things that I found that doing some research in this that's a trend, especially with the younger generation, is like college students especially studying and listening to and working. My wife actually will do this body double thing. They'll get on like Zoom, nobody's talking, but you're kind of an accountability because this is a thing that kind of started in the pandemic where people were isolated, and like lo-fi music that doesn't have any lyrics because it doesn't really take too much attention away, but it can help with focus and things like that. So I've been doing a lot of research on this, trying to find a way to make money.
Let's talk.
It's really fascinating that what I'm finding is that, like, I ask you all that because you're finding other ways of doing audio other than the traditional sense of music.
Well, I'll tell you two quickies. One, when I was a kid and I lived up north, you know, until I moved here in the 8th grade, snow up there, the ice sometimes will get crusty on the top of the snow if it's been sitting there a while. And these limbs will fall off the trees, the ice will break the limbs off, and if you're a kid, it's the boogeyman. He's out there, you can hear him walking around. So my dad would bring in a window fan. This is wintertime. And what is that? Metronomized white noise, right? And today, I got a white noise machine. When I went on trips, I'd turn TVs on channels that weren't on the air and cover up the screen and hear the white noise. And now the ad on TV, pink noise, red noise, brown noise, green noise. Give me a break, that's all. Do you know what I'm talking about? They just EQ and stuff different and calling it some color of a noise. What it does do is it masks startle sounds. Startle sounds are about 35 dB difference. If you were in a room and it's totally quiet and you sit there for a while, meditate, somebody could drop a pin and startle you. So it's really the difference in sound. So what white noise does is it'll mask it out, but it doesn't proactively calm you. It does, it's not, but it does keep other things from waking up. So that particular sound has that effect, but you can mask with all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be white noise,
All right. We're going to have to wrap up. Thank you all for being here at Counts Brothers, and thank you to Terry Woodford for sharing. I told you this guy's got stories. I wasn't kidding when I told you we got stories. Terry, stick around for a couple minutes to go on and chat with him. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, James Counts and Counts Brothers, for having us today.
I really appreciate it.